people of Frog Lake should be really well off. They should be living in mansions in comparison to other bands.
Members of a First Nation in Alberta say they want answers about how money was spent.
I'm just in such a better place financially and mentally, and I have that stability now.
And like a lot of us, she used to struggle just to make ends meet. Now she's a financial advisor to band councils and other entrepreneurs. Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Fashion mogul Peter Nygard will not face charges for alleged offenses in his hometown of Winnipeg. Winnipeg police made the announcement after an extensive investigation. Chief Danny Smythe said early last week that the investigation related to 8 people and thousands of documents. Nygard's alleged victims include Indigenous women like Nadine Moose-Toos. She appeared in the APTN Investigates episode Homegrown. Therapist Shannon Maroney says that accusers are upset. And more bad news, therapy funds for all Nygard accusers outside of the Bahamas have been cut. Now she has started a GoFundMe to raise money for the therapy to continue.
It's a devastating double blow. The therapeutic support that I've been able to provide so far, as well as some other therapists in different jurisdictions, is truly life-saving frontline healthcare. And survivors' health and sometimes lives become at risk when they have to face additional trauma, secondary trauma, to the original offenses that have already impacted their lives in so many devastating ways and for so long.
Peter Nygard has been charged for offenses in the U.S. and Toronto. He denies all the allegations. We want to hear what you think about Peter Nygard not facing charges for alleged offenses in Winnipeg. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. From 2013 to 2018, financial documents show the Frog Lake First Nation in Alberta lost $120 million in net assets. Band members have told APTN they want a full financial audit. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
That's what I want to know.
Doris Stanley is worried for the future of Frog Lake First Nation residents. She wants to know where money in her community is being spent. Now she and other members have hired a lawyer to find out. Public financial reports over a 5-year period show a total of $120 million in net assets have been lost. These 2013 to 2018 reports are available on the Indigenous and Northern Affairs website. Show a trust fund went from $102 million to $3 million in 2019. Long-term investments were dropped by $23 million by 2018, from $50 million to $27 million. The band sits on a large oil deposit, but a band-owned business called Frog Lake Energy Resources Corp. Has been losing millions since 2015. The posted financials show the overall numbers, but not the details in how the money was spent or receipts. These finances were audited by Edmonton-based accounting services Crowe Mackay and signed off on. Crowe Mackay did not return our calls. And Doris Stanley says the losses weren't explained to band members.
I want to find out for myself, by an independent financial auditor. I want to know the truth. The people are entitled to know the truth, and that we need to find out, what did happen, what happened to that money.
We reached out to Frog Lake Chief Greg Desilets, and he initially agreed to an interview, but canceled. Other members expressed concern as well, but would only speak to us if we did not identify them, fearing retribution. Lisa, not her real name, says she wants to see a full financial audit. It should include details of everything spent, including any spending by band-owned companies. She says the current chief and council should reveal their salaries, though they aren't required to. and disclose money they are making from businesses. The previous chief, Clifford Stanley, did disclose his earnings. He was chief when those losses occurred. He is related to Doris Stanley by marriage. His salary from 2017-18 was $104,000, with $151,000 in travel, plus $61,000 from Frog Lake Energy Resources Corp., bringing his total to over $300,000. And several councillors earn more than $150,000 after including travel and pay from Frog Lake Energy Resources Corp. Lisa wonders why the current administration is refusing.
We've asked for the salaries. Why can't you provide it? Why? We have a right to know.
She says the people living in Frog Lake are lacking proper housing.
You know, we shouldn't be living in deplorable conditions.
Doris Stanley says she and other members have been asking the current administration for a full forensic audit since 2019, and the previous administration before that. Chief Greg Desilets and council have not provided a full audit yet. Dave Oswald is a chartered accountant and certified fraud examiner with more than 30 years' experience. He says, in his opinion, Frog Lake should be prosperous.
It should be the model band in Canada. They should be telling the government to go get stuffed. We don't need your money because we're a self-sufficient band. But it's anything but that. They are cap in hand the whole time to government because they simply do not have the funds.
His company, Forensic Restitution Limited, conducts full audits. He says he did a preliminary audit of Frog Lake through what was available on the INAC website. He adds that a full audit is not possible without the details of where and how the money was spent. He worked for free and visited Frog Lake 3 times, saying they should be doing better.
The people of Frog Lake should be really well off. They should be living in mansions in comparison to other bands. They should have engineering facilities or some other ways of earning income being created for people to get work.
He recommends a full independent audit by someone outside of the federal government. Now, members have hired lawyer Loretta Lambert to try to force one. Doris Stanley says Frog Lake is not alone. She wants action from the federal government.
So many other reserves are in the same kind of situation. You know, who is there to help? When is that going to stop? Is, Parliament, are they going to help out? Indigenous services, are you going to help out? You're supposed to be working for the people. Where is that fiduciary obligation to the people?
Indigenous Services Canada released a statement saying that they are aware of the complaints being brought forward and are assessing the complaints to see if further investigation is required. They say they take allegations and complaints very seriously about the misuse of public funds. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Frog Lake First Nation.
Former Chief Clifford Stanley could not be reached for comment. It's a story we will be following for sure. Now, the AFN Special Chiefs Assembly kicked off Tuesday. The event is once again being held virtually due to COVID-19 concerns. It is also the first assembly for newly elected Grand Chief Roseanne Archibald. APTN's Fraser Needham reports.
Building Our Future. It's the theme of this year's AFN Special Chiefs Assembly. And looking forward is something the organization wants to do after what Grand Chief Roseanne Archibald says has been a difficult 12 months.
This has been a challenging year for many, navigating a continuous and difficult pandemic, wildfires, record heat waves, floods, landslides, all while collectively grieving the little ones who did not return home from the institutions of assimilation and genocide. I no longer call them schools. No school that I ever went to had a graveyard with unmarked graves.
Archibald also announced a planned trip by an Indigenous delegation to Rome to visit Pope Francis has been cancelled due to COVID-19 concerns. The trip was supposed to take place later this month. However, she says this doesn't mean the AFN won't continue to pressure the Catholic Church on a number of issues.
We did call on the church to make a number of reparations while these interactions are occurring. These immediate actions include returning diocese lands properties back to First Nations on whose traditional lands they are situated, and an investment in long-term healing initiatives beyond their commitment of $30 million, which was announced in September, to make sure that support programs and services are available for survivors and their dependents.
Indigenous Crown Relations Minister Mark Miller also addressed the Assembly. He says tackling land issues is a top priority.
Resolving land claims, additions to reserve and treaty settlement agreements will be instrumental in rebuilding trust, as the land is central to Indigenous traditions, identity, and prosperity. Recognizing rights and self-determination moving forward, as well as settling past harms through specific claims in a timely manner, must be a top priority.
There are a number of resolutions on the agenda tomorrow, including creating a clearer separation of the organization's political and administrative wings, and the creation of a National Treaty Commissioner's Office. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
All right, we need to take a short break, but still ahead. A woman is using her experience overcoming hardships to become a financial advisor for First Nations in Alberta.
I've experienced homelessness, having to hitchhike, using the food banks, just never being able to sustain and thrive, really. It was always a survival mode.
Welcome back. A woman from the Piikani Nation in Alberta used to struggle just to make ends meet. But now, after a lot of hardships, she has become a financial advisor for First Nations in Alberta. APTN's Tamara Pimentel has her story.
For Theodora Warrior, money has always been a barrier. Living on the Piikani Nation, she grew up in poverty.
I've experienced homelessness, having to hitchhike, using the food banks, just never being able to sustain and thrive, really. It was always a survival mode. And I know that this is something, a lot of others experience as well.
But she's overcome those obstacles and has now turned finance into a teachable skill.
All of the nations.
Warrior is the first Indigenous finance empowerment facilitator at Momentum in Calgary, a charity that focuses on economic development. After years of having on and off jobs and treading financial waters, 2 years ago she decided to take a money management workshop through Momentum.
Hi.
From there, she was hired on and created Money Moccasins, a free online course dedicated to Indigenous people in Treaty 7.
I think that this is very historic in terms of it being the first for going out to the reserves rather than having them come and look for us. And it's bringing that home. That's what I wanted to do, was bring it home.
Money Moccasins takes place over Zoom. Participants learn things like budgeting and credit by comparing them to traditional teachings. For instance, money can be treated like water.
Water can be it's a very precious resource, and it needs to be saved and preserved, respected, and to be able to use for today and tomorrow.
Warrior says these analogies are key. Financial literacy can be intimidating, and the effects of residential schools have left many Indigenous families struggling financially.
My mother attended residential school from the age of 4 to 14. And we know that they weren't schools, there wasn't any real learning. So, at 14 years old, to just be put out into the world and not knowing a thing about money. And we learn everything from home, so she didn't have those skills to teach. And so it was a lot of hard knocks and a lot of, survival times of, making money stretch for a month. That's just my mother. So when we look at all of the reserves and all of the experiences that, they incurred, and it just wasn't taught.
Warrior says many have graduated from money moccasins. She hopes to train more Indigenous advisors so this skill can be brought to more communities.
Using those fundamentals have really changed my life in the last 2 years. I'm just in such a better place financially and mentally, and I have that stability now.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
And now to our friends in Australia, where Aboriginal people there were dealing with a COVID cluster towards the end of November. The good news is that there were no more positive cases after the initial 19, all of which were Aboriginal. Now, Guy McLean of National Indigenous Television in Australia has that story for us tonight.
They're just the words everyone in the Northern Territory was hoping to hear.
There were no new positive cases in the Northern Territory overnight. This is good news, but it's not a day to get ahead of ourselves.
Positive news for a town on red alert, Katherine under a week-long lockdown as health authorities scramble to contain a COVID outbreak which remains at 19, all of them Aboriginal.
All of the known cases are from 3 households. I have to say it is unlikely that it is only contained in those households.
This is Delta, it's in large vulnerable households, we're not out the woods. The next day or 2 remain crucial.
8 close contacts were today flown from remote Robinson River to Darwin's quarantine centre at Howard Springs. 49 people have now been moved here since a woman from the community was identified as one of the first cases. A 65-year-old woman remains in hospital.
She's stable, but she's still requiring oxygen, so she's being closely monitored.
Almost 2,500 vaccinations were delivered across the territory yesterday, the 3rd biggest day on record.
The best thing about no extra cases is the time it buys our tracing teams on the exposure sites and close contacts to date.
Amid the race to test, trace and vaccinate, there are concerns for the vulnerable who are stuck in Katherine, unable to get back to their homelands.
We've seen about 130 odd people today, so but we've been giving out masks as well for people, because a lot of our mob haven't had masks.
Family back in home, they're happy and they on safety place. They're living in their house. And I'm out here, in town. I've got nowhere to really sleep.
The Chief Minister says he's open to lifting lockdown restrictions prior to 6 p.m. next Monday, provided all the circumstances continue heading in the right direction. Guy McLean, NITV News.
Now, Canadian travellers are confused and frustrated. They're questioning the new travel rules that force them to get tested several times before coming home.
I already got my negative PCR, and that's what mentioned in the airport, that I'm allowed to leave. You're not detaining me. I'm not a criminal. I'm a pharmacist. Most of the people was quarantined were pharmacists, double and triple vaccinated.
While al-Shibakshi flew from Cairo to Frankfurt and had a PCR test done in Germany. Then he flew to Canada and had another test, but was still not allowed to leave his quarantine facility in Toronto when it came back negative. Meantime, the U.S. now requires all arriving travelers, including Canadians, to show a negative COVID-19 test result taken no more than 1 day before they arrive. All right, we need to take one more break, but first, here's our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs with a preview of what she is working on.
Okay, now you can go over it with the blue.
I'm Charlotte Moore-Jacobs. Coming up this week on APTN. Sahai-an, when the sun peeks through. And Na'al, a word to describe caribou crossing a river. Both traditional Denisovan names, and both possessing glottal stops that aren't currently recognized on Northwest Territories' birth certificates.
Every time that I have to write out their name on a legal document, it doesn't feel right.
That story coming up soon on APTN.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. APTN's very own Kent Driscoll, while waiting in line for some fresh drinking water, was able to take this photo of the setting sun. Kent is our video journalist located in Iqaluit, Nunavut. Thanks so much for that, Kent. Send us your photos of the great outdoors, your holiday decorations, your pets, your family, or the wonderful world around you to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Beginning in the east, -3 in a mix of sun and cloud in Charlottetown and +1 in St. John's. -11 in a mix of sun and cloud in Nain and -21 in the Grand River. -8 in snow in Quebec City and -8 in snow in Val d'Or. Snowing and -5 in North Bay and -4 in snow in Sault Ste. Marie. Sunshine and -23 in Big Trout Lake and -13 in Thunder Bay. -25 in Churchill and -19 in God's Lake. Snowing and -12 in Barons River and -11 in snow in Gimli. -2 in snow in North Battleford and +3 in snow in Swift Current. More snow and -19 in Stony Rapids and -5 in Meadow Lake. Over in the west, more snow, -13 in High Level with snow and -8 in snow in Peace River. +6 in a mix of sun and cloud in Lethbridge and +2 in Calgary. -2 in snow in Quesnel and +7 in Vancouver. -12 in Dease Lake with some snow and +3 in Prince Rupert. -17 in Whitehorse and -20 in Rock River. -9 in snow in Norman Wells and -14 snowing in Wrigley. -11 in snow in Inuvik and -11 in Fort McPherson. -13 in a mix of sun and cloud in Baker Lake and -28 in Cambridge Bay. -17 in Arctic Bay and -17 in Iqaluit. Cree Métis filmmaker Danny Goulet's feature-length directorial debut is breaking new ground. Night Raiders is now the biggest budget Indigenous-led film in Canadian history. Goulet is host Dennis Ward's guest on a new face-to-face episode tonight. They discuss Goulet's history-making film and why she wanted the post-apocalyptic sci-fi thriller to act as an allegory for the residential school system.
I just felt as though obviously the education system in Canada had failed at revealing the truth of what happened at residential school, and that, you know, obviously this has had a profound impact on all aspects of Indigenous life. So it was important to tell a story about this so that people might understand what it is to be in a system where your children are taken away from you by law, as we know.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. Be sure to stick around. Face to Face with Dennis Ward starts right now. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.